Today I'm here with Neil Senturia, who is not just a lecturer in entrepreneurship, he's an entrepreneur himself who has written 3 awesome books. I have them right here. One of them is The Entrepreneur's Guide to the Galaxy, I'm There For You Baby. He also has an amazing blog full of great stories called also the name of the book. And also I'll include all the links below in the description of this video, and for the social media posts, you can check them out there as well. But he's somebody who has built, as CEO, 6 awesome companies, and this is a diverse range of experience, from being the writer on MASH and other shows like Alice, being an investor in Jersey Boys, and his skill sets of raising a ton of money for amazing companies in the tech space. I think it's so cool to have you here today to talk about your entrepreneurial journey and your entrepreneurial experience. But I'd love to hear from you, your kind of a log line, I guess, in terms of what you've done in your career.
Nick, I'm going to give you what the politicians do. I'm going to answer the question I want to answer and not the one you asked.
Sure.
So I will tell you a little about my career. I'm sort of, it's the problem of being Jewish and modest, at least hoping to be. But I want to tell a story. I like stories. So here's a story. So about a year ago, actually July 23rd, I became introduced to a program called Blackbird Ventures. And it's run by a woman named Catherine Hoke. And what it does is it brings entrepreneurship into prisons. I go to an event, and she says to me, you know, we're going to ask you for some money. And I say, a lot of people do that, so that doesn't terrify me. This event is in Lancaster, California. It's at the California State Prison in Lancaster. After the event, she comes up, she says, I'd like the $500 I told you I'd ask for. And I say, I'm not going to give it to you. And there's this kind of, huh? No, I'm not going to do that. But I'll tell you what I will do. I'll raise you $100,000 if you'll bring the program to Donovan State Prison here in San Diego. There's this kind of like, you know. But we did a little negotiating, and then I talked to the vice president or something of her organization. And I got a little bit of, and then I finally said, look, let me make it easy. I'll tell you what. You promise to do it if I give you $100,000 in 60 days. They say yes. So me and 3 other guys, what I call my VCs in a van, my pals, everybody has a gang, so this is my gang, we set out to raise the money, and we raise it in 42 days, and we raise it in 3 basic tranches. One is, I write a column. I guess my blog is I'm There For You Baby, and I write a column every Monday in the business section, front page of the Union Tribune, which is the local rag, which people under 40 don't read. So I have an audience of older people, I guess, because when I talk to young entrepreneurs, they don't get the newspaper. But the good news is, of course, the blog's online, so be it. So I write a story about this being at Donovan, being in this prison situation, and I say at the end, gee, if you're interested, we're going to bring this to Donovan, just send me an email and I'll get back to you. We get 57 emails, and 38 of them contribute money between $25 and $2,000. So from the populace, from people we've never met, people out in this, who read the article, we get $28,000. And then my gang, we put up 40 grand, so we're making progress. And then we get a break, which is Union Bank has a program, has a foundation, and it's run by a woman named Kathy Patoff. And she reads the story and remembers that she had met my wife, Barbara Bree, who had been nominated, or she had won something as a local hero. It turns out Union Bank cared deeply about prisons, and so they put up 50 grand. We raised $117,000, and the program started in January this year, 2017. Okay, that's one story. But here's the story that really moves and matters. My involvement started in September. I went to Donovan and said, you know, I'd like to teach entrepreneurship, and I was welcomed. There's a woman, Dr. Greenwald, who runs it, and a guy named Robert Brown. So I became a lecturer, a talker, a teacher to CGA. CGA is Criminal Gangs Anonymous. I'm thinking, this is great, I might learn something. No, you got it all wrong, Neil. Criminal Gangs Anonymous is the Alcoholics Anonymous for people who have been in gangs. Stay with me, this is important. And I go twice a month for the next 6 or 8 months, and I got friends. I mean, I walk in, I get a standing, oh, he's back. I mean, it's a little bit of serious entrepreneurship and a little bit of humor. So, it fills my inner stand-up comedian routines. So it's great. And what happens is it's clear to me that it's an amazing organization. It's been around a long time. And its program is to take people who were gang members and break them from that habit and make them commit to a better way of life. Here's the end of the story. So it's a week ago, it's not even a week, it's 4 days ago, which would make it the middle of July, 2017. I get an email from Cesar Lissay. Cesar was one of the students at the Criminal Gangs Anonymous, and he's gotten a parole, and he's in a halfway house at Spring Valley. Okay, that's interesting. He says, I'd like to talk to you. I'm all in. I'm buying him lunch. Whenever anybody gets out, I'm your first lunch. I mean, a real lunch, not like spam, and like a lunch, like go down to Osteria and have a real lunch. Now, you got to hang on for a minute because it's going to get good. Stories are hard to tell. In parallel, simultaneously, I began to work with the construction trades because it turns out that the hardest thing to get, the most desired thing in prison beside a cell phone, which is illegal, don't ask, is a job. In other words, what's hard is they got 3,800 guys, they got 2,400 jobs, and so if the thing you want to fill your time is a job. And it turns out that in the prison racket, a lot of the jobs are construction. 80% of the prison stuff is built by the inmates. So they can do plumbing, electrical, mechanical, sheet metal, drywall. They're pretty good. Another random interaction. You're the master of networking, Nick. You are the master of putting people together. And my rule, there's a couple of hundred rules in that book. Rule number three is the most important rule in the book. It says you have to go to every event and every meeting, in particular, the ones that you know are a total waste of time. Whoa. So, I'll explain it later, but the principle behind it is if you go expecting nothing, then you're like this. You're available. Things happen. So my wife is invited to a blah blah. We go down and it's at the Building Trades and Associated Building Contractors fancy dinner. Maybe she's being honored, I don't remember. And I meet a guy. And what I find over the next few months is that there is a shortage of construction workers. There's a shortage of construction workers, and as soon as an inmate gets out, they will get a job. That's interesting. So then my problem is, if they get a job, what's the piece I don't have? The piece I didn't have at the time was, how do you get them from a halfway house to the job site when they've just gotten out, and they don't really have a car, they don't even know where the In-N-Out Burger is, they're getting started. So we interacted with Lyft, and we said to Lyft, would you subsidize for 60 days, not completely subsidized, we have money, subsidized carrying Smith to the job site, the XYZ home construction, so that he gets settled. Okay, so those are things that are happening. Now, let's go back to Cesar Lissay. He comes to see me, we go to lunch, we take our pals, and he has a story, and his story, you can talk to him. You know, he shot somebody, he was a juvenile, he was tried, and he's been in prison 21 years. He got out. He's at a halfway house. Had a job, but couldn't stay at the job because the commute was too far, and he just said, "Can you help me?" He said, "I'm very entrepreneurial myself, and I've gone down to meet with the local 206 in San Diego, which is sheet metal." Okay. So we listen. He's on the list. The apprentice program doesn't start till October, but he could sign up, and they may have some work for him. There's 4 guys at the lunch. Him, Nikki, my secretary, and 3 of my pals. So I asked him, well, what's the impediment? He says they charge $85 a month to be in the union. You got to be in the union to get a job. I said, okay. So at lunch, I say, look, I'll tell you what, I'll write you a check for 85 bucks, and now you got enough to get your first month. Another guy reaches in his pocket, gives him $85 in cash, so now he's got 2 months of apprentice money. Okay? Now, if you had the wrong attitude, you would assume, well, he's going to put the cash and go buy. Let me tell you one thing I've learned about people who get out. The last thing they want to ever do is go back. And some of these programs, like Defy and one-on-one kind of work, entrepreneurial work like this, the recidivism rate is 3 or 4 or 5%, not the standard 30. But I'm not going to give a lecture on prisons. Let me finish my Cesar story, because it's a feel-good wonderful. So we give him the 2 months payment, and we wish him well. And he says he's going to sign up and get organized. And I say, just tell me, who is the guy that runs the union, the local organization? He says, his name is Dave Gautier. Okay? Now, I'm a tiny bit of a skeptical, but I want to be supportive, so I call Dave Gautier on the phone that afternoon. I get him on the phone. I say, look, I'd like to tell you that I know there's a gentleman, Cesar. He says he's already been here, gave us the money. I said, okay. I wanted to tell you that I really think he's a good person. I've known him. He said, thank you very much. And there's this little bit of coolness, which is, and then he says, by the way, I want to tell you that he's got a job starting tomorrow. That's Wednesday. That's like the day after the lunch. He signed up. There was a job. He's got it. Here's the end of the story. I said, I want to thank you. I think you might know my wife. My wife, Barbara Bree, is on the city council here in San Diego. She's in District 1. He says, not only do I know her, I gave her a campaign. I gave her money for her campaign. I walked houses to support her. And if you're her husband, well, for sure, we'll take care of Cesar. So it's a little bit of you live in reflected glory. It's the power of the network. It's the power of going to things that you had no idea. I knew nothing about construction, and now I've got people doing apprenticeships in the prison. And here's one guy in one day for $85 has a job. Wow.
And you also have trained them to become more entrepreneurial so that they have the option of even creating their own. The innovation there is really cool. I recently had dinner with the guy who created one of the largest in America. Well, actually, he was the largest bust at LAX. We had $40 million of ecstasy, got busted. He came out, created a tech company. Created an app that allows people who are trying to sell their cars to be able to quickly sell their cars. And I guess one of the things I was thinking is so many people who are trying to get their job, they have a difficult time without someone like you, but if they're entrepreneurial, they could also create their own. But I'm curious about, to get compassion for somebody who's in prison. I think that's pretty cool, especially if there's youth involved. But a lot of the people you're also educating and helping are older, people that have done crimes, that have hurt people, but you're giving them a second chance. It takes a lot of compassion. But I
believe in second chances.
Okay.
I believe in second chances. I've had them.
Was that your main motivation? What inspired you to actually get involved with this? You're teaching students of all kinds, from college to...
I'll tell you a story. This one's a little personal, a little bit dark. So I have taught at San Diego State for 5 years in the graduate school at the beginning of the decade, 2001 to 2006. I then taught at UCSD at von Liebig for 3 years in the engineering entrepreneurial program called the Von Liebig Center. My experience, and then I've continued on, and I'm a part of the community here in San Diego that tries to do some giving back, some mentoring. So here's the dark sentence. I'm also a student of, and I guess I'm getting my PhD on the streets of, behavioral economics. How do people make decisions and how do they think? And what I've learned about, what I've sensed about the current crop of young entrepreneurs is there is a sense of entitlement. There's what they say they'd like advice, but what they really would like is a check. And the truth is, the check is the least of your problems. It's the other things that you don't get right. Starting the company, who the people are, the market, all of that stuff that you think you know you don't, and what you really say when you say you're available for mentoring, you really aren't. So here's the dark sentence. Remember I told you about my gang, my VCs in a gang, and I challenged them. I said, it is easy to mentor a PhD computer science student, eagerly enthusiastic at UCSD. That's easy. Go teach somebody who's in prison the same kind of principles with the same kind of dedication and commitment. I liked that. I liked that it was, I wanted to go in a place that was less easy. Now here's the darkest sentence that you asked. I said, why'd you do it? And I think people do things for lots of reasons, but one of the primary reasons is their past. And I think that for me, I have some darkness, and I had some chances. And so I connected with these guys in a way that surprised me. I haven't even fully thought about it. In other words, I've sort of reached a point. I'll tell you what was interesting. The second time I go to talk to the criminal gangs, I get a standing ovation. So it was nice that I'd done a good job, but what was really unique was they said nobody comes back a second time. See, mentoring is like a little bit like, at least in the prison system, it's a little bit like serving Thanksgiving dinner at Father Joe's village. Thursday morning, you get up, you take the kids, you go down, homeless and less advantaged people come through, you give them food, you feel good, you go home and you watch football and have a beer. But you don't go back. You don't go back. So it's the repetition for effect. It is the going back. It's the second time. So I mean, now I'm at the point where I go back in the guard. Usually they ask you for your ID and a fingerprint and everything else. Guy says, hi, Neil, come on in. So I'm sort of one of the boys. And I'm not sure that's good or bad. You know, my wife says to me sometimes, why don't you just stay there? Maybe they'll keep you. I think people do things for lots of reasons, but at the moment, it's the most satisfying thing I do. And to see that for $160 and the right name, the right opportunity, this is a little arrogant, we sort of changed a life a couple days ago. I don't know if we changed a life, but it's a job. And it pays more than minimum wage, and it has an apprentice program, and he's strong, and he's capable, and he's got a great attitude, and he's got letters of recommendation. He's a winner. Now, I'm not telling you that every inmate is a winner, just like not every entrepreneur is a. But for me, it echoes some of my past. I think I've had some. Here's one of the questions people are asked. They say, when you look at them, it's asked, did you ever do something that was illegal? They ask that of the volunteers. So the volunteers are on one side and the inmates are on the other, and the leader would say to the volunteers, have any of you done anything that's illegal? Drunk driving? Did you shoplifting? Did you have a bar fight? In other words, and a lot of people come and admit to it. And then they ask, well, you admitted to it, how many of you went to prison? Almost no one. You know why? They're white. They got money, they got a lawyer, so I gave a TEDx talk. It's called There But for the Grace of God. So you understand, you had a chance. You got there but for the grace of God. On the other side, there's a line of Hispanic and African American and black inmates who did not have that same privilege. I'm not talking about the whole college privilege, white thing. No, I'm not using that word of privilege. I'm talking about you got a break. You just got a break. The best line of all that I like is from Warren Buffett. Buffett says, I won the ovarian lottery when I was born white, healthy, smart in America. That's all. He won. Because he does this calculation. It's great. I think I remember there was 6.8 billion eggs or people available when he was born. And his showed up out of 6.8 billion. Now I think the number's 7 point something billion. But imagine and what I want from young people. This is a little, again, preachy, so you'll forgive me. Some moderate sense of humility. There but for the grace of God. I've been successful, but I've been lucky. I've been helped. I got a chance. I mean, I'm resentful when people stand up and say, well, I started a company, I raised $5 million, I sold it for $1 billion, I'm smart and I'm rich. I don't want to hear that. What I'd like to hear when I teach, the classes I teach are the failures. I'm interested in Jawbone. I'm interested in Pointcast. I'm interested in companies that have been run into the ground and why. What could you, because you learn more from failure than you do from success. And I want to take young entrepreneurs and maybe I'd like to sand off a little of their arrogance. They always come in and say, well, our cap table is we own 97% of the company. I said, do you have an option pool? No. Did you sell preferred stock or common? Oh, common. And what's your valuation? Is $911 million. Pre-money, we have no revenue. Well, we got an investment of $5,000 from my uncle, and what does he know? So I said, you're going to have a very awkward Thanksgiving when you explain to him when a professional investor shows up and says that company is actually worth $2.2 million, and he realizes that his stock, I made my point. So I not only teach the math of finance or of entrepreneurship, but I'm interested in teaching sort of the shape of how you build a company, because the first financing pre-selects all of the other financings. The first hire is the most important. The basic 10 rules. I mean, there's a guy named Guy Kawasaki. He's written a bunch more books than me, and he's vastly more famous. But one of his themes is there's 10 slides. I actually think there's 12, but there's 10 slides in a pitch deck. They are the same 10 slides every time. Team, marketing, product, technology. He has the same 10 slides. If you can't tell your story in 10 slides and in less than 7 minutes, you don't understand your story. So that's what I talk about. It's what without changing the subject too much, I'm of the a little bit more humility school wouldn't kill you.com. I'll let Nick start that company.
That's a great quote. I'm going to have you focus on that. We take some of my favorite quotes and put them on my Instagram. And I love that if you can't explain your story in 7 minutes, then you don't really know the story. Because so much of my time for the last few weeks is doing coverage of stories and trying to figure out how to put that together, the log line, explaining that. And you come from that world as well. The world of writing, pitching, making things happen. You did it with the Jersey Boys.
Pitching is important. I mean, pitching is actually an art, and the art is, that's not the art of the deal, it's the art of storytelling. So when I was younger in Hollywood, I got paid to pitch. Not necessarily something I wrote. I go to CBS, and I would pitch, the writer, creator, but I was the pitch guy. So if you can't tell the story to the network, 5-6 minutes, it's the same story. It's the Bible, 6 characters, what do they do, and the first 4 stories. And you got to tell it in a way that is a storyteller. Now, when you're in the creative business that like you are, whether it's Broadway or TV or movies, those are storytellers. I think sometimes the young entrepreneur in technology gets confused because what he says is, you see it's got 27 gigabits and I can make it spin backwards on the head of a pin. And I say, yeah, that's interesting, but tell me, who cares? Tell me a story. And most of the best pitches, if you went and interviewed the venture capitalists, real ones, not little guys, I think they would tell you that they make decisions probably in the first 90 seconds, and they probably make it in the first paragraph, and they make it in the first part of the story. I just know that's storytelling. It's an art, and if you're going to be an entrepreneur, I think it's something worth learning. And it can be learned.
Now, you had an awesome story in Jersey Boys, but now what you're saying is, why do people care? In the same manner as someone pitching a business, how would you pitch a story like Jersey Boys to get so people actually care about that story?
Well, I didn't have anything to do with it. I wrote a small check and I got lucky.
Oh, no, as an example, just because it's a story. Or MASH.
So let me tell you the best story. I'll tell you about how you pitch a story. So there's a famous movie called Aliens. It was made in the 70s, and it started Sigourney Weaver, and every young man wanted to see Sigourney Weaver in her underwear, and I think it was also they terrified you. So here's how Aliens got made. True story, it's nothing original. The producers go to Universal, I think it was Universal, it could have been Warner Brothers, I don't remember, and they say, the producer's sitting there, are you ready for the pitch? Everybody's seen the pitch. What have you got? Here's the answer. Jaws in outer space. That's it. That's how the movie got made. Jaws in outer space, 4 words. I mean, I love that because I get it, I got it. Now, you got to be careful because now what people say is, well, it's Facebook for airplanes, or it's Google for landscaping. I mean, you can't quite get away with it. But back then, the art of that was you really got to understand that was a great movie pitch. And there's another great line about the movies, because that's something you're involved in. And it comes from Goldman, who's a screenwriter. I forget his first name. It's not Robert. I forget. And he says, he's talking about how people make decisions. And he says, in the movie business, nobody knows nothing. There is no certainty. I mean, you were talking about La La Land. So it's produced by a guy named Mark Platt, whose son also, we were talking about Broadway. His son Ben Platt is in Dear Evan Hansen, so I'll give you a plug for that's just a great musical. So what was interesting about La La Land is, like a lot of things, it started out one thing and morphed into another. So every company pivots. It was said that it made no sense and it couldn't be done. You know, I'm also a believer that I don't want to be a follower. So don't send me another app. I don't invest in apps that they're going to make it easier for me to find my dentist if I happen to be in Zion's National Park and it's raining on a Sunday. I don't want to do that. I want to try at this point in my life to solve hard things, which is why some of my investments now are in biotechs, where you can have a massive impact. Two kinds of impact. Scale. I have 400,000 subscribers to your dating site, and that's scale. Or I can create something that makes this many people healthy. One of the things I'm scheming on now is the peanut allergies. I didn't realize it was a big problem, but apparently peanut allergy is a big deal, so I'm backing a company in Cambridge that purports to solve peanut allergies. When I find out, we'll see if it happens.
I guess as a venture capitalist, when you hear stories about how it can help people, I think it's inspiring. But there's so many different products out there that can help all sorts of people. What actually engages you as an investor to make you make the decision?
I'm glad you asked. It's the jockey. It's the team. It's the person. I need two things. Does anybody care? Is there really a need? I don't know if you have the solution to the need. First, is there a need? And the second is, are you the right person? And I'm telling you, that second one is hard. So I recently, about 2 years ago, and I've been an active investor in a biotech called Abreos. It's a diagnostic, it's a platform, it solves the problem of the proper dosage. Dosing matters. You sometimes, because we're all different sizes, but currently the dosing is the same. But what interested me was the CEO. He had been a student of mine at UCSD, and he'd come the first time after class and he'd said, I have an idea, would you invest in it? I'd look at the idea, I'd say no. About 3 months, 4 months later, he comes back and says, well, I've changed it a little bit. Now I'm going to do this. What do you think? Would you invest? I say, that's more interesting. Let me do some homework. I call around and I realize that nobody cares, at least in the US. This was a product that had a chance in Europe. I don't want to do that. 6 months later, he comes again. He says, now I got it. And sure enough, he did. We've raised a lot of money. Excuse me, he's bopping along. I bet on him, even though I wouldn't know a genome from a carburetor. So it's the same. And the other thing about investing is I'm over 60. So the fact that it may not be your need doesn't mean it isn't a need. So if Airbnb shows up, no, I'm probably not sleeping on someone's couch. I'm more like, the Hyatt or the Four Seasons. I mean, that's just, I've gotten old and I have a wife. But is there a need? You bet. So you got to always understand that it's not about you. You have to say, who's the market? Do they care? Even if you're not the market. Because one of the problems entrepreneurs have is they solve problems that are their problems. So they say, I'm working on something because I had a problem in school where I couldn't get an ebook, and now I do it this way, and it meets a need. Okay, they're solving a, but that doesn't mean that the problem's big enough for other people. It may not be. On the other hand, it may be, and even though it's not the investor's problem, you have to recognize. So the problem is recognizing, is there a need, and how, and will the dogs eat the dog food, meaning will they pay for it? Will they pay for it? Either in a subscription, which is payment, or it's free and there's advertising. I'm okay with that. There's nothing, I'm not so arrogant about that either. I just got to be sure somebody cares enough to the market that's looking that they'll write a check. Because you can't be in the business of losing $1 on every widget but making it up in volume. So one of the rules in the book says entrepreneurs don't do it for fame nor for fortune, they do it for revenge. And people got a little confused. They think revenge is like, taking action, like hurting somebody. I said, no, revenge is, you need to show somebody. If you go back and talk to really successful entrepreneurs, I mean, the easiest and funniest story is, so Zuckerberg's a multi-billionaire because his girlfriend wouldn't go out with him. I mean, that's at the end of the day, I developed something that solved the problem of women. It was amazing. Now, it's a lot of other. So in my case, and I think in many cases, I had parents who were, I'm sure, loving, but not particularly enthusiastic about me. So I had a lot of what I call, I want to show you. It's interesting, there's always one or two kind of moments in your life that inform, if you really are aware, the energy and pursuit of. People choose to be doctors because their uncle had a disease and they. People choose to be, I just read recently an article about they developed this particular drug because my brother-in-law had cancer. They developed a system because when I tried to go to school, I couldn't get approved. I mean, people are driven by the need to either express themselves, prove something, show somebody. I mean, I had a music teacher when I was in high school who gave me a low grade, and the class laughed at me. This is a true story. And it's taken me a long time. I didn't like that. So I was determined to either buy all the music, or buy the building, or at least prove to him that I wasn't inadequate. That's what drives people.
Reminds me of my father. I grew up with a father who would support me, but at the same time, even the littlest things, he'll always tell me that he doubts what I was doing. So it's if I got too much food on my plate, he would say that your eyes are bigger than your stomach. And my mom would say, prove your dad wrong, and my dad would do it. If I was not going ahead in school, he would say, oh, you spent too much time playing video games. But at the same time, he'd stay up all night making sure that I was successful, even though he'd say, you're not going to be successful.
So here's the question. Does he acknowledge it now? Is he alive?
Yeah.
Does he recognize what you've done and become?
He appreciates everything we're doing, even though he said your company is dumb, you're not going to help society. And then he said he helped me. He helped me, give me advice. And no, but now it's making money. So now he's thinking it's awesome. As an Asian guy, you're making money. He's happy.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of a little bit of hope, measured by grace, humility, and then, unfortunately, a really clear-eyed view of reality. I have lots of people who come to me, and I have to say, look, here's the truth. You can either pay X, or you can go bankrupt, or there's darkness to reality. So there's a combination. The challenge is to see reality for what it really is, acknowledge it, embrace it, own it. And then I'm not asking you to give up hope either. I'll end with this, my best rule of all, or one of them anyway. Entrepreneurs need to not only acknowledge ambiguity, they need to embrace it. So the hardest skill for the entrepreneur is to go to bed at night, it's unresolved. I have unresolvedness. I've got this, I've got possible, I need to. It's unresolved, it's ambiguous, it isn't clear. And if it's okay to live in that environment where it will reveal itself over time, but while I'm waiting for it to reveal itself, I'm okay. I can stay here. It's like treading water. I'm all right. That's a great skill, and that's worth teaching.